Asia in the 12th century, a vast ocean of windswept steppes, where life was a constant struggle for survival. In this unforgiving landscape, marked by warring clans and an untamable nature, a boy named Temujin was born around 1162. He came into the world with a blood clot in his hand, a premonition, according to tradition, of a great destiny, perhaps of a warrior or a ruler. However, his childhood and youth were far from predestined for glory. Temujin was the son of Yasuge, a respected leader of the Borjigin clan. But his family's peace was brutally shattered when he was just 9 years old. His father was poisoned by a rival clan, the Tatars, leaving Temujin, his mother, Holen, and his siblings in a situation of extreme vulnerability. Yasuge's clan abandoned them, fearing the weakness of a widow and her young children. Suddenly, the future imperial family was reduced to misery, forced to survive by hunting and gathering roots on the fringes of Mongol society. The years that followed were a school of survival and a forge for Temujin's soul. He faced hunger, the merciless cold of the steppe, and the constant threat from other clans. He was captured by his old rivals, the Taishud clan, and forced to wear a wooden yoke, a symbol of his enslavement. Nevertheless, his cunning and determination were already evident. Temujin managed to escape his captors, a feat many considered a sign of divine favor. These trials, instead of breaking him, hardened his spirit and gave him a deep understanding of human nature and steppe politics. He learned about loyalty and betrayal, about the importance of family, and about the need not to show weakness. Vengeance for his father's death and the humiliation of his family became the driving forces of his life. Gradually, Temujin began gathering allies. He formed blood ties with friends like Jamuka and gained the support of influential leaders such as Togrul Khan, the leader of the Karaites. His reputation as a courageous warrior, a shrewd strategist, and a charismatic leader began to grow. He offered protection and justice, promising a better life under his leadership, a contrast to the constant rivalry and plunder among the Mongol clans. His vision was of unity, a peace that could only be achieved under a single command. In a series of brilliant military campaigns, Temujin began to subjugate rival clans. He didn't just defeat them, he integrated them into his army and society, promoting meritocracy instead of tribal loyalty. Officers were chosen for their skill, not their noble birth. This revolutionary approach created a cohesive and motivated army, personally loyal to him. He demonstrated selective cruelty, severely punishing betrayal, but offering generosity and integration to those who surrendered. Finally, after decades of civil war and astute political maneuvers, Temujin achieved the unthinkable, unifying the Mongol tribes. In 1206, at a great Kurultai or assembly of leaders, he was acclaimed as the ruler of all the steppes. The abandoned boy, the humiliated slave, had become the undisputed leader of a people who, until then, lived in perpetual disunity. The stage was set for the rise of a new era, led by a man who would now be known by the title that would echo through centuries of history. With the Mongol tribes finally unified under his command, Temujin, the humiliated orphan, reached the apex of his personal ascent. In 1206, at a grand Kurultai, a solemn assembly of Mongol leaders, ND clans, he was officially proclaimed Genghis Khan, a title that translates as Universal Ruler or Oceanic Khan. This moment was not just a ceremony. It was the birth of a new political and military entity, an empire forged on the steppe that would soon turn its attention to the world. Genghis Khan understood that to maintain the newly won unity and project his power, he needed a revolutionary army. Far from volatile tribal loyalties, he implemented a military organization based on meritocracy and direct loyalty to the Khan. The structure of the Mongol army was simple but incredibly effective. It was divided into decimal units, starting with groups of 10, or arban, moving to 100, or jagun, 1,000, or mingan, and the largest 10,000 men, or tuman. This organization broke clan ties, promoting soldiers and officers for their skill and bravery, not for their origin. The indisciplined or desertion of a single member of a unit could result in the punishment of the entire unit, creating a strong sense of collective responsibility. The Mongol cavalry was the backbone of this war machine. Each warrior possessed multiple horses, allowing them to cover vast distances and perform forced marches that exhausted any enemy. They were masters of mounted archery, capable of firing with precision while galloping. And their attack and retreat tactic, known as the feigned retreat, disorganized enemy formations before the main charge annihilated them. Genghis Khan also introduced a rigid code of laws, the Yasa, which governed not only the army but all of Mongol society. The Yasa promoted religious tolerance, loyalty, military discipline, and respect for the law, severely punishing treason, theft, and disunity. This provided unprecedented internal stability, allowing the Mongols to focus their energy on external expansion. Genghis Khan's intelligence was not limited to the battlefield. He was a shrewd strategist who employed espionage and military intelligence before each campaign. He used swift messengers and a vast network of informants to gather data on his enemies, their resources, and their vulnerabilities. Propaganda and psychological warfare were also Mongol tools. Rumors about the Mongols' invincibility and cruelty preceded their armies, often leading cities to surrender without a fight. Furthermore, Genghis Khan assimilated technologies and knowledge from conquered peoples. He did not hesitate to incorporate engineers, artisans, and military strategists from other cultures, such as the Chinese, to build advanced siege engines like catapults and battering rams, and to improve his tactics. This open mind for learning and adaptation was a crucial factor for his army's success against more advanced civilizations. The Mongol war machine, with its speed, discipline, innovative tactics, and impeccable organization, was ready. What were once disorganized tribes were now a unified force, loyal to a single leader with a grandiose vision. The universal ruler would not be content to govern only the steppes. The world would be his next target. The seed of ambition planted in Temujin's youth now blossomed, poised to spread like an uncontrollable fire across the entire Asian continent. With the Mongol army a reformed and ruthless war machine under his command, Genghis Khan wasted no time looking beyond the steppes' borders. His ambition knew no bounds, and the civilized world would be the next to feel the power of the Mongol cavalry. Genghis Khan's first major campaign was against the Western Shaya dynasty, a Tangut kingdom located south of Mongolia. This campaign, initiated around 1209, served as a crucial training ground for the newly organized Mongol army, testing its siege tactics and its ability to operate outside the steppe. The conquest of Western Shaya was brutal but successful, providing the Mongols with valuable resources and knowledge of Chinese siege warfare. Next, the target was the rich and populous Jin dynasty in northern China. The campaign against the Jin, which began in 1211, was a monumental challenge. China possessed large fortified cities, a vast population, and more advanced military technology, including gunpowder and siege weapons. However, the Mongols, under Genghis Khan's leadership, adapted quickly. They used light cavalry tactics to encircle cities, cut supply lines, and terrorize the rural population. They also employed captured Chinese engineers to build and operate catapults and battering rams, overcoming city defenses with ruthless efficiency. The conquest of Beijing in 1215 was a bloody milestone, with the city being plundered and burned. Advancing westward, the Mongol Empire encountered the powerful Khwarezmian Empire, a vast Muslim power that stretched across Central Asia and parts of the Middle East. The war against Khwarezmia, initiated in 1219, was triggered by an act of arrogance from Shah Muhammad II, who executed Mongol envoys and plundered a trade caravan. Genghis Khan's response was a campaign of unprecedented vengeance and destruction. Cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, and Urgench were systematically razed, millions of people were massacred, and fertile lands were turned into deserts, a testament to the psychological terror the Mongols imposed. The Khwarezmian campaign demonstrated to the world that the Mongol Empire was an unstoppable force, capable of unimaginable cruelty, but also of surprising military discipline in its rapid marches and effective sieges. Genghis Khan's military tactics were revolutionary. The Mongol cavalry was his most potent weapon, divided into light cavalry, composed of fast and lethal mounted archers, and heavy cavalry, with light armor and lances for close combat. They were masters of complex maneuvers, such as the pincer movement, where they flanked and encircled the enemy in a deadly vice. Speed was of great importance. Mongol armies could cover enormous distances in record time, catching enemies by surprise. The use of informants and spies before campaigns, psychological warfare with massacres to terrorize neighboring cities, and the assimilation of engineers and artisans from conquered peoples were essential components of his strategy. At the height of Genghis Khan's conquests, his empire stretched across much of Asia, from eastern China to the Caspian Sea. Despite the brutality of his campaigns, Genghis Khan implemented surprising policies of religious and cultural tolerance within his domains. He allowed conquered peoples to practice their own religions, as long as they were loyal to the Khan. He also promoted long-distance trade, reopening and protecting the Silk Road, which facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies between East and West, a legacy often overshadowed by violence. Genghis Khan was a ruthless leader, responsible for the death of millions, but also the architect of a unity and a system that, for a time, brought a new order to vast regions. His conquests were not just the result of brute force, but of a strategic and organizational genius rarely seen in history. The Mongol Empire was at its zenith, ready for the next stages of expansion, which would take his successors even further, to the gates of Europe. Genghis Khan, the man who transformed the scattered tribes of the steppe into an unstoppable force, died in 1227, during his last campaign against the Shaya kingdom. His death, shrouded in some mystery and secrecy, was kept hidden for a time to prevent army demoralization and ensure the continuity of military operations. The exact location of his tomb remains one of history's greatest archaeological enigmas, a secret guarded by generations of Mongols, according to his own wishes. Despite the founder's death, the empire Genghis Khan forged did not crumble. On the contrary, under his sons and grandsons, such as Ogadai Khan, Guyuk Khan, Monkey Khan, the empire continued to expand. Ogadai, his chosen successor, continued the westward expansion, devastating Russia and parts of Eastern Europe, and completed the conquest of the Jin dynasty in China. His grandson Batu Khan would lead the Mongol hordes that would terrorize Eastern Europe. However, the empire's vastness and growing succession disputes would eventually lead to its fragmentation. The Mongol Empire divided into several independent Khanates, such as the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. Kublai Khan himself would establish the Yuan dynasty in China in 1271, transferring the capital to Khanbalik, the future Beijing, and adopting Chinese customs, which would mark a significant shift in Mongol identity. Although these divisions weakened central control, Mongol influence over these regions would endure for centuries. The impact of Genghis Khan's conquests on world history is immeasurable and often contradictory. He was responsible for the death of millions of people, the destruction of entire cities, and the collapse of civilizations, leaving a trail of terror and devastation that is still remembered today. The violence of his campaigns is undeniable, and his name became synonymous with destruction in many cultures. Nevertheless, the Mongol Empire also had a positive and transformative legacy. Genghis Khan established a vast system of communication and trade, the Pax Mongolica, which connected East and West in an unprecedented way. The Silk Road was reactivated and protected, allowing the flow of goods, ideas, technologies, and knowledge between Europe, Central Asia, and China. Innovations like gunpowder, the compass, printing, and papermaking techniques spread westward. Religious tolerance, a fundamental policy of Genghis Khan, allowed diverse cultures to coexist, and many explorers, like Marco Polo, traveled safely throughout the empire. Genghis Khan's military and administrative organization also influenced later empires. His system of laws, the Yasa, was an attempt to codify justice in a vast domain. His promotion of meritocracy inspired leaders throughout history. He was not merely a destroyer, he was a unifier who, in his brutal way, forged a Mongol national identity and laid the groundwork for a global network that, for a time, functioned as a motor of cultural exchange. The figure of Genghis Khan remains a historical paradox, a visionary leader who built the largest empire in history with ruthless brutality, but who also facilitated an era of global interconnection. His name echoes as a reminder of humanity's limitless ambition and the transformative power, both destructive and constructive, that a single individual can exert on the course of history. He is a legend, a terror, and an architect of a new era, and his shadow still stretches over the steppes and beyond. Genghis Khan was one of the most impactful figures in world history, a conqueror who forged the largest contiguous empire of all time. What aspect of his life and legacy surprised you the most? Do you believe the Pax Mongolica and cultural exchange compensated for the brutality of his conquests? Or is the terror he imposed an insurmountable legacy? Share your opinion in the comments. And if there's another great historical leader, or an ancient empire, you'd love us to explore in our next video, leave your suggestion below. Your curiosity is our guide to unraveling the great stories of the world.